Okay, how's that? Can everybody see that? Let's go. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I'm actually going to ask Will to keep an eye on the chat box for me because I find it hard to multitask between actually speaking and thinking and going into the chat box to answer questions. So if there's anything that comes up that you think I should be aware of, just let me know.
Yep.
That would be really helpful.
Oh, well, I'll butt in and out as required.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Wonderful.
All right, so just a little bit about me so you know who's talking to you this morning. So my background is, I kind of like to say that I grew up in HR because I fell into it. So my dad was in HR and I went to uni and studied in that area, and I kind of found myself in some really senior roles from a very early age where I was the only woman on executive teams surrounded by men the same age as my father. And then I found being in HR for quite a long period of time started to impact on my own mental health. So I decided to take a little bit of a change of tact and went more into the organizational development area, focusing on culture and engagement, and then went and did my master's in coaching psychology. And I've been working in my own business for about the past 3 years now. So I've got lots of my own coaching clients, and I spend quite a lot of time doing what we're doing today, which is talking to people about well-being. So understanding what well-being is and really digging into some of the research and the science behind it to help people understand what they can do to impact on their own well-being, but also within organizations so that people can understand what they can do within organizations as well to start to shift that well-being and the impact that that can have on their business. So I partner with the Wellbeing Lab, and you'll be able to see them up on the slide there. So I'm a licensee of that, and Dr. Michelle McQuaid is the one who actually owns the Wellbeing Lab, and she does heaps of this research and kind of talks to all of the researchers in the positive psychology, systems theory, and neuroscience space. She has a fantastic podcast. If any of you are interested in more information, you can find all of that on our website. So our primary focus of this session today is to help you understand more about what wellbeing really is. And we're really going to focus up front on why struggle is a normal part of wellbeing. And I think that's a key thing that I really want you to take away today, is that we are all struggling and we all struggle at different times, but it's an absolutely normal part of wellbeing. So I'll dig into that and share with you why that's the case. Then I'm going to take you through some frameworks for wellbeing so that you can understand what kind of sits behind it and some of the things that you can do every single day that will help to support your wellbeing moving forward. And then towards the end of the session, I'll get you to come up with some actions on what you're going to do in the next week so that you can start to really impact on that quickly. And there's a whole heap of tools that you've got in the playbook that we just sent through to you a few minutes ago that you can leverage either today or moving forward with yourself, your team, and don't forget your family. So your family can really benefit from this as well. Not only if you start to shift your own well-being, but you can share some of these tools with them so that they can help themselves as well. So for those who came to the session last year, we did do one in around the same time last year, actually. It was in August. What you'll see today is that I'll be sharing some of the new evidence. So we've done a little bit more research on the Australian population on their wellbeing in May this year. So you'll get to see some of that. And I've changed some of the nudges. So you get to see a whole heap of different evidence and some of the newer science that's coming out on wellbeing as well. So you'll get to see the same framework. It's the PERMA framework that we did last year, but you'll get an updated version of that. So it's something new for you to see. But regardless, if you came last year, it's always good to spend 90 minutes actually just thinking and reflecting on your own wellbeing and what you can do about that as well. So let's get into it. We'll start here today by talking a little bit more about what wellbeing is and why it matters. So if you think about that for a moment, think about what happens to the quality of your work and the quality of your interactions with your loved ones and the people that you work with when you're feeling a little bit tired or disconnected or a little bit flat. And I'll make a safe bet there that these are not the moments when you're being your best self. And you're in good company here because I think in the last few months, we've all been feeling that way to some extent. Now, I am at home. This is my home office that you can see me in. You might see a child walk in behind me because my printer is on the desk there. I have told them that they might be in front of quite a number of people today if they do that. But I know a lot of you are probably in the same boat. So working at home and you're homeschooling or you've got young children at home at the same time. So a lot of us are not doing our best right now. So we'll focus a little bit more on some of the myths around wellbeing and then some of the things that we can actually do to start to shift it and change it. So before we do that, I want to ask you, what do you think wellbeing actually is? So if I can get you to type into the chat what your definition of wellbeing is, and we'll have a quick look at that. feeling content and balanced. Yep, so low ongoing stress, happiness is part of that, being happy and comfortable. Mentally feeling balanced, a contented state of mind, happy's coming up again, happy with what you have. Acknowledging self-care, physical and mental health, that's right. So we need a little bit of that physical side in there as well. Positiveness, we're going to talk about that a bit today as well. Feeling comfortable and healthy and happy and positive. So some repetitive words coming up in there. So people are thinking quite a lot about being healthy and happy. They're talking about their physical and their mental health. So we'll dig into it, and I'll give you what the definition is of well-being and what some of the research says well-being is. And what I want you to think about is that we hear the word wellness quite a lot at the moment, and well-being is quite different to wellness. So wellness, when we think about that definition, is really based on physical health and things that can go wrong for people, and a lot of wellness programs focus on how we make those things better. When we talk about well-being, we're talking about something slightly different. We're talking about the whole self, so the physical and the mental side of things, but not just the absence of illness. So let me show you what our definition is. So in the simplest form, our well-being is the ability to feel good and function effectively as we navigate the natural highs and lows that we all experience. So think about that there. It's about the fact that there are highs and lows in life and things will go up and down, but it's about having the ability to actually navigate through that. So when we're feeling good and we're functioning effectively through the highs and the lows, which is why struggle is an important part of our well-being. So we've done quite a bit of research into well-being, and here's what some of that research actually shows. So if we focus on well-being and we actually manage to improve that for ourselves on an individual basis, these are some of the results that we actually find. So people are generally feeling a lot more engaged, they're a lot more productive, they tend to be more satisfied in their jobs, they have less unhealthy days at work, they're less likely to burn out, and they're less likely to quit. So they're all the individual results that we find. When we look at it from a corporate perspective or an organizational perspective, we see a whole heap of benefits as well. So there's less safety incidents happening. We have lower absenteeism, lower turnover. We're likely to see people being more creative and innovative in the organization. Really important for us is that we're getting higher customer ratings and generally a higher average shareholder return. So there's a whole heap of evidence that shows that focusing on our well-being rather than our wellness actually can make a really positive impact, both for ourselves, but for the organizations that we work in. So while these statistics are really quite interesting and reassuring for us to know, I think where we should start today is to understand where you are at the moment. And so, as Will said, we're going to use some polls today. They're completely anonymous, so nobody's going to know what you said, but it's really helpful for us to understand where our community is feeling right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is check in on your well-being and get you to do a little bit of an assessment on how you're feeling at the moment. So what I'll ask you to do, and nobody can see you, they can only see me at the moment, is to actually close your eyes, put your feet flat on the floor, sit up straight in your chair, and I want you to just take a really deep, slow breath. And I want you to tune into how your body is feeling right now. And I'll ask you to take a second breath. And then I want you to think about over the past month, so just in the last 4 weeks, with all of the adjustments that you've had to make, I want you to think about how you've been feeling. And I'm going to give you 4 options. So I'll explain each of those options. And at the end, I'll ask you to select one of those. So the first option is that you've been really struggling. So it's been really, really hard for you and everything seems like it's just very difficult right now. Maybe you don't want to get out of bed in the morning. Sometimes maybe you don't get out of bed. Today might be one of those days because it's raining, and so that might have added to it. And everything that you do is just feeling like it's really hard work and it's a constant uphill struggle and you're finding it quite exhausting. So that's the first option. The second option is that over the last month at work, you've been feeling really on top of the world. Everything's been coming together. It's all been going your way. You're feeling pretty good. You've got a heap of energy and you're just feeling like life is pretty good. The third option is that you're not feeling terrible, but you're just getting by. You're pulling yourself through the days and perhaps your work or your life feels a little bit grey or dull or mundane, or lockdown's getting a little bit monotonous for you. Maybe there's no end in sight for that, but you're making it work despite the fact that it feels hard right now. So that was option 3. Option 4, or the last option, is perhaps that you're living well despite some of these struggles, and these struggles might be more temporary or permanent for you. So you know that in that past month, that your work has been testing you and life has been testing you, but you feel like you're pretty resilient and you're navigating your way through that despite some of those bumps. So I'm going to get you to take a moment, take another deep breath, and gut check as honestly as possible as you can what's actually going on for you. And then I'm going to open up a poll and I'll ask you to just put that into the poll so that we can see how everyone's feeling. Okay, you should be able to see that on the screen. I'll share the results with you in just a moment when everyone's answered. We've got about 23 people who've completed it out of 32 at the moment. A couple more seconds if anyone else wants to answer that for us. Right. So let me share the results with you. Are you able to see that on the screen, hopefully? So we've got most people, so 43% said they're not feeling terrible, but they're just getting by. We've got 36% of people saying that they're living well despite some struggles. We've got 18% of people saying that they're really struggling right now, and only 4% of people saying that they're feeling on top of the world right now, which is completely understandable given the situation that we're all in at the moment. So have a think about that as I start to share some of these results with you from how the rest of Australia is feeling. We'll kind of come back to these results, and I've just taken a quick snapshot of that. All right. So let me explain a little bit more about wellbeing and the kind of the background and the research behind it. So most people would have thought of wellbeing sitting on a continuum, basically from languishing or not having very high wellbeing all the way up to thriving. And that's how most of us kind of conceptualize that.
Sorry to interrupt, Shan. Do you want me to, the poll's still on the screen, I think. Shall I just stop?
Is it? Yes.
I'll just stop sharing that one.
That'd be great.
All right. Okay.
Done. Thank you. But what our research actually shows at the Wellbeing Lab is that it's a little bit more complex than this. So what I'm going to share with you today is some of the results that we've done from the wellbeing studies across Australia. And the first set of data I'll share with you is from December 2019. So this is when the bushfire crisis was happening. We did do some in the middle of 2020, but the other results that I'll share with you, just for a bit of contrast, are the ones we did in May this year. Now, if you think about May, it feels like a really long time ago now for us. It was actually just before Melbourne went into another lockdown. I think that was number 4 for them. But we were actually at a point in Australia where most people were starting to head back to the office or back into their workplaces quite slowly, but we were getting there. So slightly different from how people might be feeling today, but gives us some good data to kind of work with on how wellbeing actually shifts and changes with the context and what's happening. So to explain what's happening here, I think it's really important, don't get stuck on the numbers as I flash them up on the screen. I'll talk about them in a moment, but just listen to some of the states of wellbeing, because I'm going to explain to you those states that you just answered and what they actually mean. So we asked the Australian population exactly the same question that we asked you. So we had about 1,200 people in each of these data sets that were answering the questions. And here's what we generally find. So we have 15% of people who said that they were consistently thriving, and in May that was about 13%. And then we've got 41% of people that went up to 53% in May this year who are living well despite struggle. Now, what's really interesting about these two groups is that statistically, they generally get the same outcomes. And when I'm talking about outcomes, these are the things that you can see on the slide on that little post-it note. So these two groups generally have higher job satisfaction, they have better performance, they are committed to their organisations, and they have a higher level of performance. They see a high level of performance in their teams. So you can see these are the two groups that are actually really highly thriving. So they're sitting above this line. So what that actually says to us is that struggle is not an obstacle for our well-being. It can actually be an enhancer. And what our research shows is that the people who are sitting in this box here, so this living well despite struggle, and there were quite a few of you in the group today who are saying that you're sitting in this group, is they're actually the most resilient workers in our workforce. And the reason for that is because they have high struggle, but they've figured out how they can actually live through that struggle, and they've got some skills and tools that help them to overcome that. So struggle actually can be an enhancer rather than an obstacle. Now, if we move down to those people who are sitting down at the bottom of the chart, you can see for the not feeling bad and just getting by group, we had 34% at the end of 2019, and that's actually gone down to 27%. And then the really struggling group was around 10%, and that's also decreased down to 7%. Now, what's interesting about these two groups who sit below the line, so obviously they have low thriving and they could have high struggle if they're here, or they've got low struggle over here, is that all of the outcomes that sit on this post-it note are actually lower for these two groups and significantly lower for the people who are sitting in this really struggling group. So what that's showing us is that if they're not thriving, they're actually finding it really difficult to get through their workday. So there's a lot of different impacts that happen if thriving is not in place. Now, the difference that we find between the people who are actually sitting up above this line, so this thriving line, is that there's two things that they have. One is that they have a level of confidence that they can actually shape their own well-being. And the other one is that they have a level of motivation to try and do something about it. So there's two things to kind of get above this line, is some confidence in how to do it. And hopefully we're going to build that with you today, because we'll give you some skills and tools, and a little bit of motivation to help you get there as well. So they're the things that we need in order to get a little bit more thriving. So if we think about that research, there's two kind of aha moments for us. Struggle is just as much a part of wellbeing as thriving is. So if you're struggling right now, there's absolutely no shame in it. And we need to learn to talk about it more often, because it is a part of what happens to us every day. And the other part is that wellbeing has a bottom line impact on how engaged you are and how you perform and how satisfied you are at work. So finding some of these really small things that you can do to improve your wellbeing every day is going to make a big impact to your life, both at work and at home. Now, let me just talk about some of the differences in these numbers that you can see between December 19 and May 21. So we did have a data set in between that. And what we found was that circumstances obviously changed the number of workers who were consistently thriving. And what actually happened was that it halved in 2020. So the number between these two, between 15 and 13, actually went down to 7 in the middle of 2020. And it's now returned to 13%. So the number of workers who are living well despite struggles has steadily increased from 37% up to 53%. The number of workers who are not feeling bad and just getting by has declined. So that's good. So these people down here, we've actually been able to move more people up above the line, which is fantastic. So what it's showing us is that Australian workers are actually more resilient, and they've become more resilient over time. But some of the other data that we'll dig into a little bit later is that in positive emotions, meaning and health, which are some of the pillars of wellbeing that we're going to talk about in a moment, they've declined significantly for a lot of Australian workers. So what that says is that although we're very resilient, we're actually very tired. And we are now at risk of burnout. So we all need to learn what we can do to rest and recover to get that resilience back. So what I want you to think about is, if you're sitting at the top up here, so you're above that thriving line, is that think about some of the things that are really working for you and how you can share that with some other maybe colleagues or your family, and how you can build on that today with some of the things that we show you. If you're sitting below the line, the first thing to think about is that it's okay to be struggling, and I want you to actually reach out for a little bit of help, and I'll share with you some resources at the end of today that might be able to help you. I think the other thing is to acknowledge that your wellbeing is not where you want it to be right now, but you are able to actually impact on that yourself. So hopefully what we share with you might be able to help with that. The other thing to think about is that our wellbeing changes all of the time. So if I give you an example, before we went into first lockdown last year, I was absolutely sitting up in this area. I was living well, there were some struggles going on, but I was doing okay and feeling like I was thriving. As soon as we went into homeschooling, and I had 2 kids in primary school who were at home, and I had to try and focus on that and try and make my business work at the same time, I absolutely fell down into this really struggling area. I was crying on the kitchen floor sometimes, and I was just trying to make it work. So context changes this, and it's really important that you check in on your well-being consistently so that you make sure you know what's going on for you and what you need in order to move it forward. So just remember that you don't stay in those boxes, you move around based on the context and what's happening for you right now. Now, I'll share a little bit more data about in May 19 what came out, because this part's really interesting around struggle. So you can see in the bottom, these are all the data sets from 2020, and these are the data sets that we took in May 2021. So what it's actually showing us is that the biggest struggle that people are feeling in the Australian workforce actually shifted. Last year it was mental health, and it generally has been quite consistent, showing mental health. But what it's showing now is that dealing with people, or sorry, back in May, dealing with people actually became the #1 source of struggle for people. And what we're finding, and particularly other coaches that I'm talking to, is that people are finding this particularly hard, and they were back when they were going back into the office. So particularly people who are going into new roles or new organizations are finding it hard to deal with other people and to build relationships. But people have been working at home for a really long time. So there's some relationship issues that are kind of going on here. It's becoming more and more of an issue for people and more of a challenge. So importantly, we need to focus on the fact that feeling anxious is a really natural reaction to uncertainty, and that happens for all of us. But it's a really important motivator, and we need to listen to that anxiety so that we can take a little bit of action for it as well. So I was going to ask you now, we'll do another poll, and I'd really like to understand what's the biggest cause of struggle for you. If you think about what's been going on in the last little while, I'm going to ask you to just let us know what the biggest source of struggle is. So let me just pull that one up. Same categories that you can see on the screen. Okay, we've got about 21 people who've answered so far, so we'll give you a couple more seconds and then I'll share the results with you. All right, last chance, and I will end the poll. We've got 28 people. So here are the results. So we've got actually physical health is coming up. It looks like as our #1 for the community at 32%. We've got mental health coming in at 29%. Dealing with people is only 7%. 4% for managing money, navigating change is 14, caring for others is 11, and other is 4. So it looks like physical and mental health is the 2 biggest ones for our community right now. So we will share some things that will absolutely help with those 2 as we move through today. So hopefully that will be really helpful for you guys. Now, did I remove that from the screen this time, Will? I'm hoping I did.
Can anybody see it on the screen, or has it now disappeared? Sorry. It's gone for me. Can someone just mention in the chat? It's gone. Great.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So as we move on, we want to think about the fact that your goal today is to be a really intelligent and active steward in shaping your own well-being. So we're going to teach you some different skills and tools that you can use in order to make that happen. So we're going to move into how you care for your well-being. And to start that, I want to share with you some of the research that's been done by Desi and Ryan. So they've done about 30 years of research in this area of motivation and what it actually takes for us to motivate ourselves to actually change something in our lives. And there's 3 things that they've come up with. And the easiest way to remember this, and I learned this in my master's, was the acronym CAR. So competence, autonomy, and relatedness. So I want you to think about these 3 things as we move through today, because you need all 3 in order to be able to make a change. So let's talk about autonomy first. So autonomy ensures that we really have the freedom to make a choice and that we're really aligned that choice to our values, and we're drawing on our talents and abilities when we do it. So rather than it being a have to choice, something that you feel like you have to do or something that you should do or something that's expected of you, autonomy means that it's something that you want to do. So as we move through today, I want you to try and select something that you want to change, and it's something that's really motivating to you. So the second part is competence. So actually feeling like we are learning, we're progressing and we're growing. So this really enables us to find some kind of joy in what we're doing and some satisfaction in what we're trying. It's about our ability to improve ourselves. So if you think about a time when you weren't feeling your best, sometimes we feel really overwhelmed when we don't feel competent about what we're doing. So here what we're going to say is that we're going to track our progress. When it comes to whatever we decide to focus on today, we want to make sure that we're tracking our progress. We're creating a kind of learning loop so we can continue to learn in that space and try and experiment with some new things. And then the third thing I'm going to get you to focus on is relatedness. And this is absolutely our ability to connect with other humans. So it really gives us the chance to feel cared for and to care about other people. So in this area, what we need to do for our motivation is to buddy up with someone else so that they can provide some social support and some accountability. And that makes change a little bit easier for us. So if we have those three things and think about that CAR acronym, then we absolutely can make change happen in our own world because we're intrinsically motivated to make that happen. So I want you to think again right now, and I'm going to launch another poll. What is generally missing for you? If you think about this as, say, a three-legged stool, and one of those legs is sometimes missing when you try and put change in place. Maybe it's more than one of those legs. Because if one of the legs on the three-legged stool is missing, then the stool is going to topple over. If they're not the same length, it's actually not going to stand up properly. It's going to be a bit wobbly. So I'm going to launch a poll and ask you, if you think about autonomy, so the ability to set a want-to goal, something you want to change, your competence is tracking your learning progress. And the third one is relatedness and making sure that you've got some social support. Which one is generally neglected when you're trying to change something? Because this will help you figure out what you need to do a little bit differently as we move forward. And you can choose all of the above if you've never thought about these three things. Or you might be very good at this, so it might be none of the above. Okay, we've got about 20 people, so a couple more seconds and then I'll show you the results. Okay, let me share the results with you. So a lot of people are saying that generally they're not setting want-to goals. So it might be doing something because it's seen that it's needed by somebody else or something that you need to achieve. So really want you to focus on that today as we start to move through this and find something that you really want to achieve because that will help you make the change. So second in line looks like competence is being able to track your progress as you kind of move through. And the third one that's getting in the way for us is that relatedness. So it sounds like most of us have got some kind of social connection and support, which is great. For those of you, so 14% of you said that you're not very good at all three of these. We're going to give you some tips and tools that you can use as you kind of move through. And for 3 of you that said that none of these get in the way, well done. We might be able to learn some things from you as we move through. So feel free to share some tips and tools if you've got anything that might help us. All right. I think I've got rid of that one off the screen. So let's move in and understand a little bit more about wellbeing. So the framework that we're going to be using to understand wellbeing is the PERMA framework, and it was put together by Dr. Martin Seligman. So he's from the University of Pennsylvania, and he's kind of like the godfather of positive psychology and wellbeing. So he talks about all of these. He started with 5 different pillars, and the last one, health, has actually been added on when more research has been done in this area. So we start with positive emotions, which is the presence of heartfelt positivity. So these are emotions like joy, awe, interest, pride, amusement, generosity, gratitude, and serenity. And these basically just change the way that your brain works. So we'll dig into that a little bit more and understand it. The second one is engagement, which is really developing our own strengths and understanding how we can actually use them every single day to get some of the tasks done that we need to do in our everyday life, but to feel better about how we're going about that and more engaged. The third one, which we just talked about a little bit, was relationships or relatedness. So how do we actually connect with other humans? And obviously this one's had a big impact as we've all been working at home and we're in lockdown. So we need to think more deliberately about how we're building these relationships and making that work. The next one is meaning. So this is our chance to make a positive difference. And this is all about having a purpose in our lives. So being able to make a difference to other people. And it doesn't have to be saving the world. It can be just making a difference to one other person in your day. The next one is accomplishment. So the ability to achieve things that matter to us. And, you know, having that feeling of accomplishment or achievement really makes us feel better about what we're doing. And finally is health. So the ability to move and sleep and eat well is a key and pivotal pillar of how we actually feel and our ability to navigate some of those struggles that we talked about a little while ago. Now, what the research actually shows is that we need a presence of all 6 of these, but for every single person, every individual, the level that you need of each is going to be slightly different. So you'll notice that there are people in your life who are very health conscious and they need to go for a run every single day and they eat very healthy food. That might be the key pillar for them, but they have to have a level of all of the other 5 pillars in order to have high well-being or to have their well-being supported. Now, for other people, relationships might be the key thing. They might be highly extroverted, and being able to talk to people and bounce ideas off them and feel connected might be the most important thing, and the other ones can be a little bit lower. But what you need to remember is that you need to have a level of each of these pillars in order for your well-being to be supported. All right, so let's jump into these, and I want you to have a think about how you're going on each of them at the moment. Now, you actually have this in your little booklets that hopefully you've been able to print out or you've got on a separate screen there. So if you have a look at that, let me just see what page we've got it on. It's on page 9. I just want you to give yourself a score out of 10 on how you're feeling over the past week in each of these different pillars of well-being. And here we're talking about work, but it doesn't have to be work. So it can just be how you're feeling generally. So it can be, obviously, a lot of people are now taking a little bit of time off so that they can homeschool their children or to focus on what needs to be done. So think about it that way. How are you feeling about positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, accomplishment, and health? So I'll give you a couple of moments, and these scores are just for you. I'm not going to ask you to share them. Give yourself a score out of 10, and then we will move forward to understand a little bit about each of these pillars. All right, so I will crack into the first one, and we're going to talk a little bit about prioritizing positive emotions. Now, this is all about those heartfelt positive emotions that I mentioned before. So things like joy, awe, interest, pride, amusement, gratitude, and serenity. Now, I know a lot of people think of these things as the fluffy stuff, but actually there's quite a lot of science and research that sits behind this now that shows how much they actually impact on our brain, and then therefore impact on the way we think and our behavior, and then our relationships with other people as well. So let's have a look at some of those research findings. Now, Sean Aker is a huge contributor in this space in his research. And he says that the greatest competitive advantage in the modern economy is a positive and engaged brain because of all of the research that's been done in this space. Now, if you're interested in reading some of his stuff, I cannot recommend this highly enough. It's a fascinating book that talks about happiness and how it impacts on you at work and on the people around you as well. And he does some amazing TED Talks, so just Google him and you'll be able to listen to him. He speaks very fast, so sometimes you need to listen to his TED Talks a couple of times. So some of his research and the researches that other people have done in this area talks about the fact that if we're able to change our mood and the state that we're in at the time, it actually has some impact on what happens to us at work. So things like our mindset and mood, when they're really positive, we're generally smarter, more motivated, and then we can be more successful in what we're doing. When our performance basically changes, if we're in a positive state, our productivity changes, our creativity, our engagement, all of these things actually improve when we're in a positive state. We perform better in leadership positions. We generally receive higher ratings and higher pay in those positions if we are seen as more positive. And the last one is that we take less sick days and we're less likely to quit or burn out if we have a positive state of mind. So a lot of the research in this area has been done by a lady called Dr. Barbara Fredrickson, and she's fascinatingly come up with a theory that's called broaden and build. So this theory talks about the fact, and she's been able to show this through a lot of her research, that when we instigate one of these really positive states, so joy, pride, amusement, or gratitude, that she does the same experiment on different groups of people. And when she puts them into this positive state of mind, they perform better on all of these different things. But when they're actually in a neutral or negative state, generally what happens is that your brain is only focused on what's in front of you. So when you're in a positive state, you're seeing a lot more. So generally visibly being able to see what's around you, but you're more creative, you're able to solve problems better as well. There's a whole heap of data and research that sits behind this. And if you're really interested in this, I would say go and Google Barbara Fredrickson. She's got some amazing TED Talks where she talks through some of the experiments that she's done and the research that she's been able to show. So generally what she's found is that physically, we actually have less of the stress hormone cortisol, which actually really helps us physically. Intellectually, it helps us because we're able to take in more information that's actually around us at the time. Socially, it helps us because we tend to want to spend more time with people who are also positive because it's contagious. And emotionally, it helps us because we're more resilient when we're in that positive frame of mind. So there's a heap of research sitting behind this. But this one's really interesting for those who've heard of Daniel Goldman, who does a lot in the emotional intelligence space. He's found that 20 to 30% of business performance is determined by our mood. So that's a huge amount of impact. So if you think about what you can do then to put yourself into a positive mood, you want to be in that positive mood when you're trying to do something that's really creative or innovative. You need to do brainstorming, or you need to come up with new concepts and ideas. But then you want to be in a more probably negative or neutral mood if you're trying to do something that's really detailed. So I know everyone's BAS is due this week. You don't want to be in a positive mood because you don't want to be creating numbers. You want to be in that neutral mood because then you can really be focused on the detail of the things that are in front of you. So it's important to match your mood to the task that you're trying to do at the time. So the well-being nudge for this one is that positivity is actually a choice, and it's a choice that we all need to make again and again, day after day. So what we're saying is that in the morning, you can choose to do something that's really positive, that puts you into that right frame of mind for the things that you've got coming up. So for me, that choice is to actually get up in the morning and to go for a walk. And I do that every single morning because it puts me into a great frame of mind to start my day, and it makes a massive difference to what happens afterwards. So think about what you can do in the morning that's going to put you into that positive frame of mind and bring up some of those, induce some of those really positive emotions that we talked about before. So the next pillar that we'll talk about from wellbeing is how we build engagement. And this one is about how we become more engaged in what we're doing when we're using our strengths every single day. And our strengths are really our neurological superpowers. So they're our patterns of thinking and feeling and behaving, and we build them up over time. And our brains have become wired to be able to use them because we do things more effectively when we're utilizing our strengths. We have more energy when we're doing them. We find them a lot more enjoyable, and we have higher levels of mastery in these things. So if we think about our strengths, the emphasis on strengths is really linked to an improvement in performance. So there's some research that was done by the Corporate Leadership Council that shows that when leaders go into performance conversations with their employees and they focus mostly on the strengths of that person, over the next period of time, they actually get a 36% improvement in performance. But if they went into a conversation and they focused on weaknesses, which is honestly how most performance systems are set up, to focus on weaknesses and filling gaps, they generally get a decline of 27% in performance over that same time period. So that's a massive difference in that performance between 36% increase or a 27% decrease in performance. And it's because we're focusing on what people are really good at. So there's all sorts of benefits to that. It's not just about performance, it's actually about confidence, because when we're doing something that we're good at, we have more confidence in that, and we build our confidence over time. It also improves our resilience, because when we're doing something that's boring or mundane, something that we're really struggling with, it builds our resilience when we're able to leverage our strengths to get through that. And it also improves our well-being on all of the dimensions, so physical, relational, emotional, and social. So really it's about how do you understand what your strengths are so that you can leverage them more every single day. And there's a couple of ways that you can do this. So there's the VIA Strengths Finder, which you can actually do online. It's free. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes, and it will send you a report that's got all of the top strengths listed out, and you really just focus on those top 5 to understand which ones that you're bringing to work every day. You can also do this one. So this one's more work focused. So it's the Strengths Finder from Gallup. You can order the book online on Amazon or any kind of good bookstore. And in the back of it, there's a section that you basically rip off the back, and there's a code in the back so that you can go online and do that. Online, again, it sends you your report so that you know what your top strengths are. And it gives you a whole heap of help on understanding what they are and how you can utilize them every day. So as this quote talks about, your character strengths really represent how you like to work. They're the things that you're intrinsically motivated to do. So if you're able to do more of that every day, it makes you more engaged in what you're doing. Now, when I'm coaching clients, this is generally when I'm starting a coaching engagement, I'll start with a strengths assessment because it helps us to understand what they really like to do and what they're engaged in so that we can start, as we have our conversations over time, leveraging more of those strengths in what they're doing every single day. So you can optimize your job by deliberately connecting your top strengths to the work that you're doing every day. So we talk about this concept of flow, which is when we're completely absorbed in what we're actually doing. Sometimes you can lose track of time, and that's generally when you're using your strengths to the best of your ability. So you're really engaged in what you're doing and you're not really taking notice of anything else that's happening around you. So the wellbeing nudge for this one is to take a strengths pause during your day, take a deep breath and to ask, which strength will I use next? So thinking about whatever that task is that you're going to do next, and what are one of those top 5 strengths that you've got that you can really apply to that task to make yourself feel like you're more engaged in it, that you're more confident in how it's going to happen. So I'd really say to you, go out and do one of those strengths assessments because it really does help you to understand how you can leverage your strengths more every day and be more engaged in what you're doing. Right, so our next pillar is how we invest in relationships. And there's a whole heap of research by Adam Grant, who's done heaps of research in both this, but in lots of other areas as well. And he's written this fabulous book called Give and Take. So another one that's definitely worth a look at. He does some great TED Talks as well. And his research talks about how we have beliefs about the relationships that we have at work. And he describes these in 3 different categories, and you can see those up on your screen at the moment. So he talks about givers, takers, and matchers. So let's talk about takers first. Generally, these are the people who you work with who feel like they can get as much as they can from other people. So they're always taking from everybody else. The second category was the matchers. So they do take from others, but they're generally trying to help others out at the same time. So it's kind of that quid pro quo going on. There's an exchange of favors that's going on between people. And the third group that he identified were the givers. So they generally will give whatever they can to others without expecting anything else in return. Now, I'm going to launch another poll and ask you, from all the research that he did, who do you think he found was most likely to succeed in an organisation? Do you think it was the givers, the takers, or the matchers? This one's always interesting. All right, a couple more seconds and then I will show you the results. All right, here's what you came up with. So 58% of you thought the givers were going to be more successful, and then we've got a balance of takers and matchers kind of coming in second, which is very interesting. So what his research actually showed was that givers go to the top and the bottom in organizations. And so there is a category of givers that actually succeed and do really well, but there's a category of givers that actually do worse than the takers and the matchers. So the matches actually end up in the middle, and that's because they're so busy trying to match everyone from what they're giving and what they're taking, that they end up too busy to actually get to the top and to succeed. And the takers in the short term actually do quite well. So they actually rise and they succeed. But in the long term, people get to understand that they're not going to get much in return from those people. So in the long term, people actually stop giving to them, and the takers actually end up being less successful. So if we think about those givers then, because some of them are very successful and some of them are not successful, there are 3 things that Adam found in his research that actually help them get to the top. And here's what those things are. So he calls them self-protective givers. And the first thing is they set boundaries around when, how, and who they're going to give help to, so that they're not burning themselves out. So it's not just that they're people pleasers, they really understand what their strengths are. So going back to that relationship and engagement pillar that we talked about before, really understand what it is that they have that is valuable to others and who they can be of most service to. So they're not so busy helping other people that they can't get their own work done. There's some boundaries set around what they're going to do and why they're going to do it. The second part is that they're also willing to ask for help when they need it. So they'll put their hand up when they need some help from other people. And the third thing that he found out about these people was that they look for win-win-win outcomes. So this means that they're looking for what's in it for them, what's in it for the other person, but also what's in it for the team or the organization. So there's 3 lots of people who are winning from this. They ask about how it's aligned to their strengths, and they don't just say yes, they're very wise about who they help and why they help them. So they're not wasting resources. So these types of self-protective givers were the most successful in organizations. The ones that were the least successful givers were the ones who are constantly giving to everyone all of the time. Because what he found for those people was when they had no boundaries, they were giving their time away and they actually didn't get their own job done. So they were underperforming in some of the tasks that they needed to achieve because they were too generous with other people. So some really interesting research when we think about it that way. And so when we think of what Adam is basically telling us to do is that we should be able to willing to do something that will take us 5 minutes or less for anybody. And there's a whole heap of research he talks through in the book Give and Take around people who do this and the benefits that it actually provides, because it's kind of like it continues down the line. So it starts to impact more and more people. So he talks about being willing to do this for someone without expecting anything specific in return. So it's a confident expectation that someone else is going to do something for me down the road. And when you do ask for help, it increases the odds that people in your network will seek to add value rather than trade value. So it's a low cost thing that you're going to do in this 5 minutes. It feels low cost to you, but it potentially has a really high benefit to other people. And when I talk about that, I mean things like connecting people in your network. So somebody who's looking for something and you know someone who can provide that service or that advice. That's something that you can do in less than 5 minutes, but it can have profound effects for people. It can help people get jobs. It can help, people with their revenue and to get more services out there. There's lots of different things that you can do in less than 5 minutes. The other thing about this is that giving is contagious. So it spreads quite rapidly and widely across our social networks. And there's been a whole heap of research to show that this is the case. And the final thing on giving is that when people walk into a new situation, they're generally looking for clues about behavioral norms that take place in that organization, in that friendship group, or in that team. And when that starts to occur and they're noticing that giving is happening all of the time, it becomes the norm. So it's then part of something that we do every single day. So organizations who started to do this can start to see that there's profound effects that happen when people start to do 5-minute favors. So that's our wellbeing nudge for this one, is practice doing a 5-minute favor for someone else each day. Not only does it help you because you become more of that giver, but it also helps a lot of the people around you, and it has that flow on effect to others as well. Right, let's move on to the next pillar, which is the 4th one, and we're talking about how we foster meaning in what we're doing. And I know for a lot of you, you're probably owners of your own business. So this one's quite an interesting one, because what we talk about here is that studies show that the #1 thing that people want from their work is a sense of meaning and purpose. So we really want to feel like what we're doing every day has a reason. So we have a why for why we're actually doing that. And the research shows that it's more than, making more money or a different opportunity or work-life balance or job security. It's actually feeling like we're making a difference to somebody that keeps us motivated and wanting to do what we're doing. So There's been a heap of research by Robert Vallerand, and what he's found is that when we get this sense of purpose and that sense of meaning, right, it's called a passion, and it can have an enormous amount of energy for us. But his research also shows that obsessive passion for our work, which generally can happen for those of us who own our own business, we've become so passionate about it, is that we feel like it's making such a difference. And it has such an impact on our own self-worth that we become defined by the work that we're actually doing. And it can become really hard to switch off and hard to maintain that balance with the other things that are going on in our life. So this type of passion is called obsessive passion, and it causes burnout. So it has a really negative impact on our well-being. It causes us to become less flexible in the way that we're approaching our job, and it can be another impact is that it makes us less open to change and what's going on around us. So we then are finding that making a positive difference for others means that we have this uncontrollable urge to keep doing it, and other things start to slip away. So it's harder to stop doing some of that work because we're so obsessed with making a difference. Now, that means that we can sometimes feel conflicted about our passion in other areas of our life. And then there's an increase in some of these uncomfortable feelings that come with that. So some of those uncomfortable emotions, and we need to regain some of that balance so that we don't risk burning out. So what's really important here is to think about whether what you're doing and the work that you're doing is becoming obsessive or not. So what he says is that a passion is harmonious when you feel in control of what you love doing. So he suggests that we should be aiming for that harmonious passion when we're still feeling joy in what we're doing and it's energizing us in a really healthy way. And the way to do this is to make sure that you still have a sense of control over what's happening, that you're still able to stop and to switch off, and you're still able to have some balance in the other parts of your life. So it might be about thinking about the proportion here, and what are the potential gains versus the energy and the effort that you're putting in. So when you have harmonious passion rather than obsessive passion, generally you've got higher levels of physical health, psychological well-being, self-esteem, positive emotions, creativity, concentration, and work satisfaction. So there's heaps of different benefits if you focus on the right thing. So it's harmonious passion rather than obsessive passion. So the wellbeing nudge for this one is that when people have more than one passion in their life, studies actually find that they're much better off. So here what Robert talks about is thinking about your passions as a big pie. So if you think about the big pie, how big a slice is work taking up of that pie for you? Now, there's no right answer, but it shouldn't be the whole pie. There should be other pieces, different pieces of the pie as well. So have a think about how you slice that pie up to make it more practical for you so that it's not an obsessive passion, but a harmonious passion. And so here it's about thinking of some of the things that you can do that help you to balance this out a little bit more. So in the chat box, I'd really love you to share with us, what are some of your other passions outside of work that help you to get that balance? So just share with us in the chat box if you can. Family, yes, huge one. Cooking, love that one, me too. Gardening and home renovation, I think that's a massive one at the moment in lockdown. There's lots of people focused on that. Music, sport, friends and food, running, music and yoga. They've got another gardening there. Bushwalking. I saw so many people out bushwalking on the weekend. Kayaking, barbecuing, socializing, friends, church, physical fitness, right? So we're all aware that there are other things that we can be really passionate about and put our energy and effort into. So it's really important that we are noticing that balance and not becoming obsessive about what we're actually doing from a work perspective, and finding meaning in some of the other things that are happening in our life. Got some other answers coming up about dancing, creative arts, yoga, and family time. So make sure that you're thinking about that pie and how you can slice that up so that you're getting a little bit better balance. All right, let's move on to growing accomplishment. So this is our fifth pillar on the roadmap, and it's really about our ability to learn and grow so that we can continue to achieve what matters most to us. And what has a huge impact on what we accomplish is actually the way that we think about it. So again, we're going back to some of the research by Martin Seligman, who came up with the PERMA framework. And before he did that, he spent a lot of time actually focused on understanding the stories that we tell ourselves. And they really help to shape the way that we think, how we feel, and how we act. And so our brain is really a sense-making machine, and we generate all of these stories before we even realize that we're doing it, because our brain works so quickly. So the challenge for a lot of us, or all of us actually, is that with so much information that's coming into our brain every single day, is how we make sense of it and how we create these stories around two different questions. And this happens automatically. We ask ourselves, why is this happening? And what might happen next? And then our brain makes up a story to make it make sense to us. And because as humans, we have a negativity bias, we tend to grab onto the least favorable information that's coming our way. And often we're not aware that we've actually grabbed onto that. And that's the story that we're making up in our head. So we're completely unaware that how much we've only taken a thin slice of the reality that's available to us. And we're focusing and shaping a story around how we're thinking about things, how we're feeling about those things, and how we're going to act on those things based on that tiny little bit of information. And this really impacts on our ability to have well-being and our resilience in that moment as well, because it has a direct impact on what's actually happening to us because of the way we're thinking and acting on it. So he talks about the fact that if you want to improve your ability to respond to adversity, you really need to learn to tune into the stories that you're telling yourself. So here what we're talking about is something called metacognition, where we're thinking about how we're thinking. So we've really got to do a bit of reflection here. So what's difficult about this is that we've often got so much going on in our head that we can struggle to hear some of these stories. But I'm going to give you some examples of the stories that we psychologists have found that we generally tell ourselves. So some of these things they happen automatically in our brain. We don't know that we're doing it, and we struggle to recognize that we're coming up with these stories. So the first one is the not being good enough story, which is generally about being embarrassed, or we feel that we're desperate to withdraw from the world around us when something's not working for us. The second one is the that's not fair story. So generally it's when we're feeling really angry and we can lash out at other people or blame other people for what's happening. The third story is I'm always stuffing things up. So, getting into that point where we're feeling guilty, and there's a flurry of overcompensation that kind of happens in our stories. This is going to be really bad stories. So generally makes us feel really fearful, and it escalates our level of anxiety and panic. And another one is I'm such a loser. So generally it makes us feel sad and alone because we start to doubt ourselves and what we have the ability to do. So just to be clear, the goal here is not to get rid of these stories. It's actually to notice that they're happening. So we need to be more mindful and intelligent about some of that self-doubt and some of these beliefs that kind of sit behind it, so that noticing that these are the things that actually hold us back. Because if we're having these thoughts, they impact on how we feel about the situation and then how we act in that situation as well. So the wellbeing nudge is actually to think about these three questions. And this comes from some of the work by Martin Seligman, where he talks about optimistic and pessimistic explanatory style. So there's three things that sit underneath that, and it's the way that we personalize the information. So it's that belief that we are at fault when we personalize it, it's about us. The pervasiveness of that belief, so that it's going to impact on all areas of our life, not just what's happening right now. And the permanence piece, which is the belief that the aftershocks of this event will go on for a long, long time. So that's why he's come up with these three questions, because you can, in the moment, start to challenge some of those thoughts. So the personalized part, is it all your fault? Is it really all your fault, or is there other things that are happening that are outside of your control right now? The pervasive one, will it really affect everything, or is it only going to affect what's happening right now and this small piece of work that you're doing? And the third one is the permanent one. So will it always be this way, or is it just something that's happening right now that's going to pass? Sometimes that's about thinking, in 12 months, am I even going to think about this anymore? Is it something that's just, happened like that and then it will be gone? So there are three really simple questions you can ask yourself to start to challenge some of the stories that you're telling yourself. All right, so our final pillar is heightening health. And this one is a really important one. And a lot of you just talked about this when we were talking about the different passions that you have, is lots of kind of health related answers. So, you know, bushwalking, dancing, getting outside and gardening, all of these things to impact on our health. So here we're talking about how we eat wisely, how we move regularly, and how we sleep well. So more than 8 hours a night, and having these periods of rest and recovery that really help to form our health habits. And it's about choosing to prioritize these quite consistently. So not just having one choice during the day. So not going for one run is not going to make us fit. Eating one piece of broccoli is not going to suddenly make us healthy. It's really about making consistent choices and taking consistent actions all of the time. So Tim Rath has done quite a bit of work in this area. Sorry, Tom Rath, and he talks about the fact that small choices about how we eat, move and sleep each day count more than we think. So what he talks about here, even if you just look at the picture, is when you have these choices around eating the donut or the apple, and I always have people in the chat now saying that they're going to eat both, that's totally fine, it's about making consistent choices. So if you make the choice to eat the apple, what he actually finds is that making that small choice actually impacts on the other choices that you make throughout the day. So these small choices actually add up, because they impact on your energy levels. So if you eat the apple, you're generally going to have a sustained amount of energy rather than that spike that you will get with the donut. And that impacts on how much you want to move. And then how much you move is going to impact on how much you actually want to sleep or you need to sleep. So the trick is to consistently make some of these small choices simultaneously in the day, which actually really help to impact on each other and create a virtuous cycle. So the better you eat, the more energy you'll have, the more you'll move, and the better you'll sleep. So that is the wellbeing nudge for health, is to make some small choices about how you eat, move and sleep each day, because they count more than what you think. And for me, I think I said before, one of the key things for me is actually getting up in the morning and going for a walk, because it changes my whole outlook on the rest of the day. It also helps my energy level. So I used to find at 3 o'clock I was really tired and I couldn't really keep my eyes open. I don't have that problem anymore because I'm walking every day. When we went into lockdown, at the beginning of this lockdown, I actually found that going out in the afternoon for a second walk to see the sunset helped my mental health, not so much my physical health. So doing those things has actually really been helpful for me to really notice the difference that it makes on my energy levels throughout the day. So if you want to go into the chat and share with us some of the things you're doing for eating, moving and sleeping that you found really helpful during lockdown, so that we can share some of these with each other. Lots of running. I've seen lots of people out running. Going to bed earlier, that's a fantastic one. Getting into a bit of a routine around bedtimes. Eating twice a day. 30 minutes of exercise each day with music. Walking, bushwalking. Yes, I know. Having a morning walk. I didn't go this morning either because of the rain. I've just noticed it stopped a little bit, so maybe we can get out this afternoon. Yoga and meditation. New experience is great, but they're really useful. Lots of yoga. My kids are doing some of the online PE lessons, so that's also helpful for people who can't get outside in the rain. 90 minutes of bike riding each morning, and exercising with someone else. I think that's a great one, right? So doing that exercise, and we are allowed to go out with one other person. So that relationship and connection piece is actually also helpful there, because you're doubling up on two of the pillars at once. So walking, listening to music, balanced meals, socially connected virtually. I think that's really important as well. Fantastic. So you're all finding different things that really help. Reading to children. Winding down off screen time at night, also very important. All right, so we've been through all of the pillars and I've given you some ideas and some different nudges on what you can actually do, but now is the time for us to actually come up with some plans so that you actually do something once you leave this webinar. So what I would like you to think about, these are all of the nudges that I gave you, and you will find them in your playbooks. So they are on page 10. I've noted all of those down for you. Now, if you didn't like the nudge that I gave you, that's absolutely fine. I've given you some additional ones. So if you look at the next 2 pages after that, you'll see how you can care for your well-being. And there's some different sorts of nudges under each of the different pillars that might work better for you. And that's completely fine, because well-being is all about what makes you tick. So find something that works better for you. And on the page after that in your book, you'll find something that will help you care for your team's well-being. Now, you might not work in a team, totally fine, but your family is also a team. So think about it that way. Some of these you can actually share with your family. So the one under positive emotions, you can see here, ask what's working well. So rather than asking your kids how their day went, this one's a great one to ask at the dinner table. So what went well today, and get them to come up with an answer to that. Finding reasons to laugh. So there's lots of different ones in here that you can use, not just with the teams at work, but also with your family and your friends. And feel free to share these around as well, because we want to create this ripple effect where we're helping people with their wellbeing while things are quite difficult at the moment as we're all in lockdown. So time for you guys to come up with some actions. We're going to talk about how we can change our own wellbeing. So you'll see on the next page, so on page 13 in your books, you've got a page that looks like this. Now, I want you to think about, when we went back to the very beginning of the webinar, I asked you to rate these 6 pillars and how you've been feeling in the last week on each of these pillars. Now, you don't have to choose the one that had the lowest ranking. Choose the one that you're most motivated to change right now. Which one's going to have the biggest impact for you, or going to give you the biggest change in your next week? So choose one of those, and I want you to write in that little box underneath, what's the nudge that you would like to try, and try and be quite specific about what that might be. So just quickly have a think about which pillar it is and what that nudge might be, and write it in there. And then I'm going to get you to dig right down and get a bit specific on the next page. So I'll give you a minute to do that first. Okay, so hopefully you've got one nudge under one of those pillars. We're going to go back to the research we talked about at the very beginning about our own motivation, and we're going to use that 3-legged stool to really think about what it is that we can do to put in a plan that's going to be sustainable. So one of the things we talked about, so there was 3 parts, so CAR, competence, autonomy, and relatedness. So here what we're talking about is the want to goal. So this one, obviously all about your autonomy. So what is it that you want to do that you have complete autonomy over? So what's that goal that you're going to set for the next week? So I want you to write that and be really clear on what that goal is, and make sure that it's something that you really want to achieve. Okay, the second part we were talking about is the competence piece. So how are you going to track your learning progress so that you can assess whether this is working or not? You can't just put it in place today on Tuesday and hope that, by the end of the week, it's all been okay. We need to actually be tracking our progress every single day to make sure that it's actually working, and make some tweaks in between if it's not. So how are you going to notice and track that you're making some progress on this particular goal? So write down an idea for that one. And then the last one there is the relatedness part of motivation. So making sure that you've got the social support and some accountability as well to make sure that it happens. So I'll give you an example. So one of these that a client I was talking to came up with recently was thinking about making sure that she was getting more sleep. So she talked about the want-to goal being that she wanted to go to bed at 9:30 every night and have 1 hour to read, so that she would then try and go to sleep at 10:30. She talked about tracking progress. So she was going to use a sleep app that she had on her phone to actually track her progress throughout the week, because it gave her some data every morning that she could have a look at to see whether she'd achieved that goal. And the buddy up was obviously her husband, who she shared the bedroom with. So she told him about this goal and the reason why she wanted to achieve it, and obviously needed him to be aligned with that because he's going to be in the bedroom, so going to sleep around the same time. and really helping to hold her accountable for that. So if she hadn't gone up to bed at 9:30, to make sure that he was kind of giving her that encouragement as well, and then checking in on each other to see if it was working. So that's kind of an example of how you go through all of these 3 different areas of competence, autonomy, and relatedness to make sure you've got the right measures in place to make this happen. So in the chat, if you guys are willing to share some of these goals that you've come up with in some of the pillar areas, if you can type them in and share them with us, that would be really helpful. Okay, we've got one focused on accomplishment. So try and tell us what your goal is and how you're going to hold yourself accountable for it. We got anyone willing to share their goals? Okay, so we've got less time on the smartphone, keep it away from the bedroom, and telling your wife in order to get that buddying up, which is fabulous. Okay, reducing the amount of television time. It'd be great to know how you're going to hold yourself accountable for that. So how you're going to track your progress. Everyone's telling their wife. The wives are in charge of everything for buddying up. Establish some new clients, build the team, and sell the services. Yes, children are great accountability partners too. And it's really awesome getting them involved in some of this stuff. And you can see on in the booklet, there's lots of different activities that you can actually get them involved in when it comes to wellbeing. So engagement, having a to-do list, buying and downloading a nice notebook or a template from the list. What about an accountability partner for that one, or a buddy? Lara, who have you got that could help you with that? All right. So it looks like people are still working on them. I can see there's people kind of thinking it through and typing them out, which is fabulous. I've got some more coming up now. So daily art practice, setting up a weekly schedule, ticking off when it's been achieved, and joining an art group for motivation and accountability. I love that one. Lara, you've got a small team at work, maybe a friend who works in a similar environment. That's a great one. So buddying up with someone that you work with. Engaging positively to finish, tidy up loose ends, courses, build pipelines. All right, so everyone's coming up with lots of different ideas on what they can do from their goals. Make sure that you think through those 3, different legs of the chair so that it's not too wobbly and that you're not losing one of them. Because if you've got all of those 3 ready to go, particularly that want to goal, so it's something that you really want to achieve for your well-being, that will help you get there. Now, this research by BJ Fogg, who does lots of work in this area of coming up with new habits and making changes in our life, he talks about the fact that embracing mistakes and discoveries is a way that we can move forward. So he says they're not failures. We need to notice, and this is why it's really important, as we talked about, to make sure that we're checking in to see whether we've achieved some of these things. Just because you didn't do it for a day or 2 doesn't mean that you failed. He talks about the fact that they're gifts and they can help you to really refine your car recipe. So competence, autonomy, and relatedness, so that you can be more successful and you can reduce the wobble on your stool. So during this time, the best thing that you can do is to really notice how you're feeling. Because remember, we talked about well-being can change really rapidly. So notice what's happening for you and take some of these tiny steps forward. So it can be really small things like taking a deep breath, getting out of the house to go for a walk, and being really kind to yourself is really helpful as well. Think about the people that you work with. the people that are around you, so the people that you're in the house with all day, and how you can share some of this with them to try and get them to focus on their well-being as well. And, you know, the thing that we talked about at the very beginning was making it okay to talk about struggle. So this is one of the key ways that we can help people feel safe, both at work and at home, and to help them increase their well-being, is knowing that a high level of struggle does not mean that we don't have a good level of well-being. It means that we're actually resilient if we know how to work through that struggle and that we can thrive at the same time. So there's a few things that I've got for you that might help. There's a free ebook on my website, which talks about how to move from functioning to flourishing. That's got some more tips in it if you'd like to download that. And if you'd like to really check in on your well-being, there's a free PERMA wellbeing survey. So it basically takes you through all of those pillars, and you get to rate each one of those, and then you get a report that's got heaps of ideas on what you can do under each of those pillars so that you can build a personalized well-being plan. So feel free to use that. It's also on the website. Now, here is a service that a friend of mine mentioned to me the other day when I told her that I would be doing this webinar for our local community and lots of business owners. So she works in the wellbeing and mental health space, and she brought this to my attention. So Beyond Blue actually runs this program, and it's completely free and confidential, and it's actually for small business owners. So it's really to help you. There's a coaching program, so it's about mental health coaching support, but it's tailored to small business owners so that they can really help you get some action and get the support for your mental health when you need it. So it's all done via phone and video call. So the details are in the playbook that I've sent you as well, if you want to have a look into that. I've got no affiliation with them at all. I just thought that it sounded like a fantastic thing that might be really helpful to some members of the community right now. So that's all I have for you today. If you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat.
Thank you so much, Jan. It's really, really good presentation. So much in there, so much to apply, and I think in every aspect of our lives. So yeah, if anybody has any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. Obviously, you have Xian's playbook, so you can refer back to it. This is also being recorded, so you can also refer back to the recording at a later date if you require. So does anyone have any questions before we wrap up? If so, just please put it in the Q&A box. There you go. One of the best and most valuable presentations I've seen. Thank you so much. So there's some good feedback. That was excellent. So there's some great feedback. Well done, Xian. Any questions for anyone? Okay.
Great. So Black Dog Institute and TAFE are also doing some support for small business.
Great. Great. Yeah, I encourage you to refer back to this as well at a later date, because it's useful to make some of these practical steps habits, and that'll always be very useful to you. And also remembering, I think, that struggle is part of well-being. I think a lot of people think struggle is not, and it is obviously so important. And I think Xian's really made that clear in this presentation. So if you're struggling, it's not necessarily a terrible thing for your well-being overall. So there's no questions coming through. So everyone seems extremely happy, Xian. So thank you so much. Thank you everybody for attending. Us at Ku-ring-gai, we're running these programs on an ongoing basis. We have a home-based business community of practice, which we started last month. So if you wish to attend the next session, I'll be sending information out about that. We do have one question come through, Xian. How does one make sure one sticks to the CAR principles? It's a very interesting question.
So this, I would say, is all about the accountability for yourself. So there's something that we call the learning loop, which is really about how do you make sure that your learning is being applied and that you're reflecting on it all of the time. So one of these things would be to actually maybe write yourself a note and put it up to your screen if you're working on a screen all day, or in the kitchen, wherever it is that you're going to see it, to try and keep it really front of mind so that it's something that you're thinking about quite often. And, you know, having that buddy is also something that's supposed to help you be really accountable for it. But I think coming back and asking yourself those 3 questions around competence or autonomy and relatedness is what you can do to try and make sure that it's really forefront of your mind.
Okay, so keep in the forefront of your mind all the time. Okay, yeah. Any other questions, anyone? Just quickly. I think that is probably it. I will send everyone an email after this with some of those links. I know they're in your pack, but I will also circulate some more information and some information about some of our upcoming events. So, Sian, I just want to really thank you. You did a great presentation last year. I think you surpassed yourself again this year. Brilliant. So much great content, really well delivered. So really appreciate it. And yeah, I look forward to working with you again in the future.
Thank you. And
Thanks.
everyone, just look after yourselves. It's really important right now that we're looking after each other, but looking after yourself is the most important thing. So reach out if you need some help as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.